Okay, so let's get started here. My name is Mitch Milam. You probably already knew that. I'm a free-range Dynamics CRM architect. You can reach me at any of these methods here. A little bit of housekeeping on the webinar itself. So what we're going to be doing is everybody's muted on the mic, of course. If you want to raise your hand if you have a question, please do so. Otherwise, you can just put it in the question box. That works as well. I'll try to pay attention. I got two screens, so sometimes I have to kind of focus one or the other. So I'll try to get your questions as they come in. Webinar should be found on the webinar page. I got a lot of good feedback from my email that I sent out earlier in the week about topics. So we've got some good stuff coming up. I'll probably send that out beginning of the week, probably on Monday with the new schedule for probably the next four or 5 weeks, something like that. Don't forget to sign up for Knowledge Bits, which is my free email information delivery service. We've got learning plans at extraordinarycoaches.free stuff, and a bunch of other stuff is on the way, of course. Excuse me. Okay, so what we're going to cover today is the what, when, and why of customizations within Dynamics CRM when we're basically going to be discussing entities and fields, forms and views, views duplicated there, reports and dashboards, automation and mobile, and then some more specific Dynamics 365 stuff there. So there's a lot to cover today. I'm just going to kind of touch the high points. There are going to be some other webinars that I'll have after this to follow up. Like, we're not going to be discussing solutions today, even though it's a big part of customizations for some people. So that will be a different webinar unto itself. So the first thing to really think about, and I've actually gotten to very, shall we say, excited discussions on the word customization. So what many different software packages refer to as customization, we actually are doing configuration. So, and the discussion I got into was actually more like an argument about customization and supportability for upgrades and all the other good stuff. If you've worked with Dynamics 365 or CRM for any period of time, you might have become kind of spoiled as to how cleanly the upgrade process works. Now, does it have issues? Occasionally, yes. But for the most part, the way that they've designed the customization system for new fields and entities and the JavaScript and all the other things that we do, it's pretty painless. I mean, again, they do change things occasionally that cause us problems. We have to revalidate everything on an upgrade path. But for the most part, we are kind of saved the possibility of all of our work being thrown away and having to start over. That is not the case with other packages. And some packages, an upgrade is like rewriting the package itself. So, again, we're kind of spoiled. So most of what we deal with is technically configuration because it's done without code. We can create new tables, database tables without code. We can create new fields without code. The data entry forms, the lists or grids are all done codeless. So, again, you get kind of spoiled with the speed at which you can actually develop and prototype and put new things into action for your users. So when you're thinking about configuration versus customization, you always kind of need to keep that in mind, especially if you're a partner and you're working with people who have dissimilar backgrounds. Say they came from another group of partners out there, other software, maybe it'd be Oracle or SAP or Salesforce.com or any of those things. So those configuration and customization standpoints are radically different than what we have in the Dynamics world. So just keep that in mind as you go through the conversations with your customers, either internal or external. So the what of customization. So I kind of divide this into two basic stages. So stage one is customizing metadata. So we have entities and fields and relationship between entities. We have visual components, which include the forms, the views, charts, dashboards, reports, etc. And then stage two, I kind of divide into the more advanced things that we do. So we have automation, which is processes, and there's several of those, of course. Business rules, which is coding without coding. And then finally, the handwritten JavaScript that we need to resort to some things to get the job done. So these two stages are the what. So this is what we're actually going to be customizing for everything. So again, most of the stuff that you're going to be working with will be within the stage one. It's all done without writing a line of code. It's all drag and drop or easily configurable, things like that. This is where most people actually stay within their customization journey. They may go into automation. Business rules are fairly, I'm not going to say a new development, but they've only been with us for a few versions. So most people can use JavaScript by doing what we call clipboard inheritance, which is actually cutting and pasting from the internet. So we have that going for us. So here is what I found to be the typical customization path for someone like us. So the first thing we do is we edit forms and views. We add things, we remove things, we rearrange things, we create charts and then put those on dashboards. Then maybe we get into creating new fields and entities. Then we create processes. Then we create business rules. And finally, we get brave enough and have enough experience, we actually start writing some JavaScript. And again, a lot of these things that we're doing, people have been doing for years. There's lots of data out there about how to do stuff, lots of great blog posts. I've got a lot of stuff on my site. I've got some of those learning paths that I talked about earlier to help you get started with JavaScript and things like that. So there's a lot of good information out there. All you got to do is just do a little bit of digging to get around to it. So the very first thing that you really have to know about starting your customization journey is you have to understand the product. That just kind of goes without saying, but I have to mention it up front just to make sure that you understand. So you can't develop against a product you don't know. And why this is important is I see people make mistakes all the time where they go and they start doing something without fully understanding the product. And what they do, either purposely or most of the time inadvertently, is they actually replicate something that the product does by itself. They just didn't dig far enough to find it. And what happens is, in most cases, they don't do a good job. And then when somebody else comes in, it's like, oh, did you know this is over here? And like, oh, no, I didn't. And all it was because they just didn't invest enough time into researching what the product does. So you need to know and understand the user interface and the navigation. And again, this changes with every major version of Dynamics CRM /365. So 2013, they introduced a new paradigm for us that was modified slightly in 2015. 2016 has a new interface. And finally, Dynamics 365, the latest version, has a slightly different way of handling things as well. So each one is different enough that we really kind of need to understand where things are pointed and how it actually works. You need to understand the terminology that we use. So when we say view, that means a grid. Okay, so if you don't know the terminology, you're not going to be able to speak to people, and you're not going to be able to understand what the conversation should be about. You also need to know the customization points. We covered those earlier. So we can create our own fields and entities. We can create forms. We can modify this, modify that. So you need to know where those things exist. And finally, you need to know where to go to get help should you need it. And you will need it because there's just a lot to learn. And there's lots of great blogs out there. Almost everything that I learned by doing it. And I started off by just doing a quick Google search and saying, hey, has anybody done this? And if they hadn't done it, then I would just dig into myself. And then when I found something that no one else had done, I wrote a blog post about it to share my knowledge so that somebody else didn't have to waste their time recreating what I already knew. So that's the key there. And I've actually written a blog article about that last year too. So just kind of reiterate for everybody, if you don't have a blog, you need one, because everybody has different experiences, and the more we share, the better off we all are. So keep that in mind. So when should you customize? Well, don't do it just to be doing it, okay? We're after business problem solution. That's what we do. We find a problem, we fix the problem, we go on to the new problem. So the idea is we need to solve a problem that makes the life of the user easier. That's what we're after. So part of that is we have to learn the business. You can't automate what you don't know. So basically, you need to understand how the business works, what the processes are, make sure that the processes are well and clearly documented, because if we don't get that, then we can actually end up with a bad place at a bad time. Technology does not solve process issues. So as I tell people, when you automate a bad process, what you end up with is a really fast bad process, and that doesn't do anybody any good. So keep that in mind when you're doing these things. Rule number 3, it's not about you. It is about the user. So if it's a pain to you to do this thing that you have to do and you don't want to do it, you need to think about, well, how does it affect the user? I'm sure some of you probably heard a story I told a long time ago, where I tell it occasionally. I went to coffee with a guy in one of my local networking groups, and he had a customer who was ecstatic about saving 2/10 of a second on a screen pop for users in the call center. 2/10 of a second. Who gets excited about 2/10 of a second unless you're in NASCAR or something like that? Well, it turns out that 2/10 of a second translated into $2 million of savings a year, because that allowed the customer service rep to service that many more customers. So again, small gains can be very, very effective in increasing productivity. So it's always about, what is the user doing? Are they repeating themselves? Do they click more buttons than they need to? Things like that. So again, it may be a pain in the butt for you to do, but it is the value you're providing is to the user. A lot of background noise. Does anybody else hear a lot of background noise? Hang on a second. I don't hear anything. Okay. Nope. Okay. Now we get to the why. So what is the purpose of the customization? It goes back to the thing I just stated. What we're hearing, or what we're working with the users, is we need to solve a business problem. Now, are we solving the business problem for everybody, or just for a group or groups of people? And that kind of really depends what the solution is. Some things can be customized strictly for a group, or a small group of people, or maybe a large group of people, and then some things affect everybody. So it really kind of depends on how you want to do that. So getting started, the first thing that I would recommend you do, and George Dubinsky, my friend from Australia, gives me a lot of grief when I publish something that has the word new. So the default publisher, and this is found under Settings, Customization, Publishers. The default publisher is the thing that controls how the prefix for entities and fields, etc., is named. The default is new, and you need to change that to be the initials of your organization. In this case, this is for me, so it's just M3 is the prefix I've always used. And that does a couple things. First off, is it names your whenever you create custom things, again, like entities or fields, it prefixes it with M3 underscore. And then also the option sets are named or numbered according to a formula figured out from that prefix. So with M3, the option value prefix is 28,790, and if you add 100 million to that, you get that's what the actual things will be whenever you start creating option set values. So this is the first thing I do, just get it away from new, so that it makes it your own, because there are situations where maybe somebody accidentally give you some stuff that has new in there, and you may have conflict with naming. So this is the first thing I do. Real simple, takes 2 minutes. All you got to do is go to the default publisher, change your prefix. You can even change the display name if you want to. You don't have to, and hit save and close, and you're done. So real simple thing to start out with. So let's talk about entities. So whenever possible, use out-of-the-box entities for the intended purpose. Now, the reason I mention this now is because a lot of you are probably upgrading from earlier versions of CRM. Depending on where your CRM started, so maybe, believe it or not, people started at version 3 or even 1.2 or 1.0, and they upgraded over the years. What you may find is people reused entities because we didn't have a choice. There were no way to get certain functionality points out of the product because they'd just not been added yet. And so as time went along, people continued to use those things. And then what happened was we had a situation where now we have to use that functionality as the way it was intended, and it's too late. I worked on a contract for about 2 years, many years ago, and the previous people had repurposed the opportunity, and they called it referral. Well, it ran their business, their entire business. And right before I left, about probably 3 or 4 months before I actually left the contract, we finally got the salespeople involved. Like, again, I worked there almost 2 years at this point, and the salespeople did not use CRM at all. Well, now the problem was we didn't have an opportunity we could use. Like, well, can you change it? Like, no, we've got too many processes built on this one entity. So what happened is I actually had to create a sales opportunity entity just to get around the fact that the salespeople didn't have opportunities. And then, of course, I lost all the additional functionality that goes with it. So be very careful when you need to do that. Don't recreate existing entities unless absolutely required by whatever business case you're using to justify the customization to start with. A very common one that I have done personally is things like contracts. Contracts within Dynamics 365 are very, very specific to a method of work. In most cases, they don't fit the way a lot of people do contracts. A lot of people don't care about numbers. They don't care about start and stop dates. They don't care about a lot of these things. So I've actually, I had one recent last year where we were working with a contract. And I said, okay, we have a built-in contract. It has some very specific ways it works. I need you to go and I'll create some samples and I'll show you how this works. Go play with it and see if it works with the way that you want. Because what happens is, like with contracts, once you activate a contract, it's more or less set in stone. You can't change it. Well, a lot of people change their contracts. It's not like a binding legal document or anything like that. It's just a kind of a placeholder for record information. So that was the case there. We actually ended up, they thought it would work and they worked with it for a day or so. It was like, no, this won't work. There's too many side effects of the feature matrix for the contract. Another one is the order. So again, the way that the product catalog is created and price list and the way all of that is connected to the quote order invoice system within Dynamics 365, you really have to make sure that it will work for you in whatever way is necessary. I've had a couple customers where it was too restrictive based on the way that they did work. So they actually created a custom order entity because they needed additional information, and then some of the information and some of the processes behind the scenes that they required made me recreate the out-of-the-box stuff that CRM already did. So I did that with both JavaScript and a plugin, depending on what the situation was. So again, as long as you have a business justification for doing this, it's worth it because remember, you're creating a maintenance point. Anytime you do something to this level, you're going to have to maintain it in the future. So just keep that in mind. It's okay if everybody, including especially the customer, understands that, okay, we're going to go and do something that CRM already does, and here's why we're doing it, and make sure everybody agrees. Let's see, Jim says, you mentioned not to create custom entities. This should be applied to fields within entities. Not there yet, Jim. Hang on a second. Like right now. Okay. Do not repurpose a field. Just create a new one. So again, if you, depending on again where you're starting off, if you started off, say probably after CRM 2011, you probably won't see this much. But if your CRM system happened to be created earlier than that, I ran into one the other day, last year, and I was just kind of dumbfounded because I was going along doing some work, and I'm like, what is this field called? And it's like, why is it there? And it's like, well, they had started off with CRM 1.2. Who knows how many years that was ago? 12, something like that, 13. And what happened was we didn't have the ability back then to add certain fields to certain entities. So what they did, they just took an unused field. This one happened to be off the address and just renamed it. Now you can't change the schema name, which is how I found it, but you could change the display name. So they needed it for something, some kind of customer tracking data, and they just renamed it. And as far as anybody knew, that was it. But when I saw it, I'm like, why is this field in here looking like this? And that's when I figured out that they had repurposed it. And they did it like 3 or 4 fields across, say, account and contact. And again, it was just because of where they started. And what was funny about it is the fields weren't even used anymore. They hadn't been used for probably years. So anyway, yeah. So basically, like Jim said, use existing fields as much as possible. Don't recreate stuff that Microsoft has already spent the time and trouble to create. There are a lot of behind-the-scenes functionality that exists within the entities and the fields that make special things happen, and you need to understand that. Addresses is one of them. So addresses are handled very specifically. There's actually a secondary entity called the customer address entity that actually contains all the addresses for contacts, accounts, and leads, and it's maintained behind the scenes. So whenever you add data to address data to those entities, it actually creates a copy and sticks into a different entity. So if you didn't know that, that's how that works. Gordon says, should you delete unused fields? Well, that's a good thing. You cannot delete system field. Cannot be done. But it probably every year or so, it would not hurt you to actually go through and see what fields you're using, what fields you're not. Because what happens is, like, let's take a sales organization. So everyone sells things differently. Everyone requires different types of data. Like I had a partner bought one of my utilities last year, and it was like they were going through their own system, and they found like they had 100 fields probably. I'm not exaggerating at all. So between 75 and 100 fields, and what those fields were from a specific group of people that were sales managers, salespeople. They just went and they basically at the time everybody probably has system administrator access, and they just added fields and stuff to the form, no problem at all. And then what happened is those people left. The new group did the same thing. Well, this went on for several years, and next thing you know, you've got 100 custom fields that have no data in them. And all it was they had basically just people needed specific fields for specific needs, and then when those people left, those fields were ignored, and it just kept going on and on and on. And we run into this a lot. So it wouldn't be a bad thing every, like I said, year or two, whatever, or especially if you're coming into a new organization, or maybe you're just kind of becoming self-aware of how the system works, and you're like, why do I have all these fields out here? They're not on the form, and there's no data in them. Do I need them? And probably you won't be able to find anybody who knows anything about them at all. Okay. So another note here is option sets. So a global option set is an option set that can be used across entities. So my friend Gus Gonzalez wrote an article, I think it was him a few years ago, about almost always using global option sets. So what a global option set is defined once and just referenced from different things. If you think there's any possibility that an option set will be used between the entities, make it a global option set, because it's a one-time decision. You can't reverse it once you make it. And the idea here is I've got an option set that's on contact or account, and then I've got a custom entity that has the exact same data in it. I need those to be the same data, and if they're not the same data, then I have to make allowances for that. The easiest way to do that is just create one global option set that's used on both entities. Like I've got a situation where realistically, I would love to take like 2 or 3 option sets that are on the I think opportunity or account, and convert them over to global option sets, because we use that same data. One of them we use the same data, I think, in 4 different entities, and it was created before I came on board. So what I did is I created a global option set because we were adding it to other entities. So now I have, at one point, we had a discrepancy in the option set values between 4 entities. So 2 of them were fine because they were global option sets, but the other 2 were not, and they had basically wrong values. So I had to actually write a little thing to actually change the data so that they all match. It's a pain in the butt. What I would love to do is go back and change it to one global option set for all entities, and then remove the other fields from the entity. But we have too many reports that references those, so it just puts me in a position where it's a maintenance problem, and it's not worth the time and effort it would be to correct the problem in the proper way. We're just stuck with it. So again, if there's any doubt, make a global option set. There does not seem to be any performance issues with doing that or anything else that I can find. I think Gus's article was talking about he just almost always now creates global option sets for everything, and that's probably not a bad thing. Ray says, is there any way to bulk import option set data? This all have to be added manually. I looked in the XRM toolbox. I didn't see anything. In fact, I had to do one the other day because I created a new one. It had like, I think 35 options in it. And so I had to do them all by hand. I was thinking, man, that would be a perfect tool for the XRM toolbox, which I mean, if I need to go look again, make sure it's not there, but if it's not there, I'll probably need to write it. I don't think it would take that. It's not that big a deal to do, I don't think. Okay. So let's talk about forms. So here is the form designer. So if you ever use CRM 2011, this is what the interface looked like. Basically, you need to get comfortable with this. So this is where all the magic happens, and probably a large chunk of your user experience is going to be created from within the form designer. Views are coming right after that. But get comfortable knowing how this works and all the things that go with it. A few little keyboard shortcuts. You can use arrow keys to move things around. Delete key deletes them. Enter key will display the properties. Control Z, Control Y, and Control S are undo, redo, and save. If you didn't know that. Tabs can have columns. Tabs can be visible by default, and they can be collapsed by default. Here are the properties, the formatting properties for a tab. So they have 1 column, 2 column, and 3 columns. Now these are not the section columns. These are tabs. So tabs can have columns, and then sections have columns. We'll talk about that in a second. So you can have columns within columns. And as you see here, I've got 3 columns, and I actually have them displayed in a slightly different manner depending on how I want to do it. So you can accept the default, or you can change the widths manually once you have selected the default there. Sections can be changed anytime after you create them. So if you don't like the way it looks, you can always modify it. Sections can be also visible by default if you wish. So we can have 1 through 4 columns. We can put the label on the left side, the right side, or center it, and we can put it on top of the field or to the left of the field, depending on your setting there. Default is top left for your field placement. We'll talk about that in a minute, why that matters. So again, the label alignment and position are actually controlled by the section. They're actually formatting properties of the section itself. And again, like the tab and the section, fields can be visible by default. This is an example. Now this is older. I think this is a screenshot from 2011, quite honestly. This is an example showing 2 different sections with 2 different layouts. The default is the one at the top under the general tab, general section, and that just has the standard stuff on the left. The address information has the label on the top. So the reason why this is interesting is because you can change the look of the section and therefore the form based on your decision here. And again, it's just a setting, and you can change it at will. The idea here is you're needing to present the data in a slightly different way. Most of the time when I have seen people, myself included, use the label on top of the field, it's when I have a lot of small fields, like say a lot of checkboxes. I want the label on top of the field so that it looks more like an item, and because depending on your layout of the section and the tab, you can actually have too much space between the label and the data element. So in this case, checkbox. So sometimes it is better on top. Be very cautious using this setting, because what happens is, as you can see from the top versus the bottom there, those look radically different. Okay? People don't like different. Different makes people question things. Questions turn into phone calls. Phone calls are bad, right? So, form design advice. Number 1, do not go crazy. Keep fields at the minimum required. I have personally designed forms that are 4 feet long. That's a bad thing. People don't need to fill out 4 feet long forms. With 2013 and above, it's not as obvious, but before, let's say 2011, 3040-2011, the data entry fields were white boxes with a bluish-grayish background. And so people had what I call the white box syndrome. They saw a white box and they were terrified because they thought they had to put something in the white box. It made them feel better or keep their job or whatever it was they thought they had to do, and it made them nervous. Okay, and again, nervous users are not good users. So the idea is you only display the data that's required to do the job. And you can do that by putting the fields into their own sections, by putting them into tabs, by collapsing those tabs, and things like that. So you only show the data that's required for the operation as it needs to happen. Also, keep subgrids at a minimum, or place them inside of a collapsed tab. That makes, one, the performance better because the contents of a collapsed tab is technically not rendered until the tab is actually expanded. So anytime you have subgrids, it has to load all the data of the subgrids. Well, that increases your page load time. Okay, so keep that in mind. And again, to follow up, don't go crazy with your stuff. Okay. The most important tip here, and again, this is a lot, you'll see this a lot in upgraded scenarios. So we came from CRM, say 4 to 2011, et cetera, up. Use configuration over code when setting the default state of a tab, a section, or a field. So what happens if you look in your JavaScript on your form, if you have JavaScript, and you see a bunch of set visible for a tab, a section, or a field, you need to convert that into a checkbox of the configuration. And here's why. When the form is physically built in memory, it looks at the state of the visual component. So again, tabs, sections, and fields, and then it will add them or not add them to the object model based on if that set visible or the visible by default property is checked. So what happens is you can do that with code. So what happens is you check it as default, as visible by default, so it shows up, and then the form loads, and then your JavaScript executes, which hides whatever it was. The problem is, depending on the speed of your system and your user's computer and your network, and if you're wearing blue pants that day, the user could possibly see the screen change in front of them. And again, that makes them nervous. Nervous people make phone calls. Phone calls are, again, bad. So what you do is the default state for anything you set with configuration. Is it visible or invisible? Is it hidden or hidden? Is it read-only or not read-only? Is it, in the case of a tab, collapsed or expanded? Whatever the default state for most of the operations of that form, you need to do with configuration, because it just makes the whole form more performant and just makes everything better for the user. Okay, any questions on that? Nope. Okay. Okay. When you start experimenting with forms, and you will do this sooner or later because you just get kind of crazy and you get off a webinar with me, you're like, oh, I can do this. He said I could do this. Make a backup. All you do is open a form you want to customize, do a save as operation, and what that will do is it will create a new form. And then if that's going to be your main form, just when you get to the form list, set the form order and move that new form to the top. Okay? So look at this layout. I actually stole this from a customer, not this exact thing, but the general idea. And he had created this on I think it was Contact, and he moved the social pane over to the right-hand side. I'm like, well, that's interesting. So I was working on a demo here for somebody, and I was like, okay, well, let me try to recreate that. This is kind of a pain in the butt to do because I kind of had to delete everything and start over almost. So what I ended up doing is putting the subgrids in the middle and the social pane over the right-hand side, and then I removed all the fields that they didn't need to see from the left-hand side, and then this is a result. I think this is very, very clean. And because the customer actually said that too. So this is very clean. And what this allowed me to do is arrange the tab with custom sections. So I think we have 20% on the left column and then 40% on the other two columns. I think that screenshot that I showed you earlier from the tab properties is actually this exactly out here. I think that's the way it is. So anyway, so this is just one way of doing things. And again, I'd never thought about it until I saw it. And I was like, that is such a good idea. Let me try to see if I can't recreate that and see if it has a different look. And I got done. I was like, I really like that, because one of the things that's kind of always bothered me about the 2013 and above interface is the fact that social pane is kind of obnoxious. It's right in the middle. A lot of times it's full of blank space and just kind of, just right there in your face. And just the simple act of moving it over to the right a little bit actually makes it a little bit easier to deal with for the eye. To me, this is very symmetrical because the things are almost lined up, and it's just a little bit better. So, your opinion will probably vary, of course, but this is one thing that you can do to just try to experiment with this. Now, the problem with this is, as I mentioned earlier, this is only one entity. This is just contact. So what do I do about the account and the little opportunity, all other stuff? Do I do the same thing? I don't know. Maybe. But again, it's kind of a pain because you have to take everything off and put it back because of the way that the tabs and sections and stuff would default to be created. Also remember, there's more than one form. So this is the account entity on an organization that has the portal installed. So there are a few things that are in there, but as you can see, look how many forms we have now. So we have cards, we have main forms for the Interactive Service Hub, we have Mobile Express, we have Quick Create, we have Quick View forms. You need to know what all of these different types of forms do and when you will use them and what the restrictions are. So for instance, the Quick View form is just a little card that gets stuck into another form just to show information without copying it. A Quick Create form pops up when you've had it turned on for the entity and you hit the plus sign at the very top of the navigation, and it slides a form down from the top, has nothing but data entry fields in it. You enter the thing, click save, and you're done. Okay? So these things matter depending on the situation, and so you'll need to understand how to use all these things. Any questions on that? Okay. So views, very similar. So here is the views for the account. So there's 16 of them these days that are built in. A lot of them are kind of strangely named. They're maybe used. They've been there for a long time and stuff like that. The biggest thing with the to think about with views is, first and foremost, is the default public view correct? Most of the time, the default public view for most major CRM entities is my accounts, my contacts, my opportunities. Is that correct? Or does it need to be active accounts, contacts, opportunities? What makes more sense for the user? Do we have the design and layout? So in other words, do we have the ability to see the data we need to see? Is it laid out? Are the proper columns in the proper spacing, in the proper order, things like that? Okay. Do I need to create custom views for stuff? One of the things I do all the time is I utilize the relationship type field on the contact and the account, and then I make sure it's populated with, say, customer, prospect, lead, partner, vendor, whatever criteria that you want to use, and then I make views for that. So I have a view for active customers, I have a view for active partners, I have a view for active prospects. Because some people within an organization, that's where they live. So we give that to them. Okay. Kurt asked if I'd use the hierarchical form much. No, Kurt, I have not used the hierarchical form much at all. Editable grid. Dynamics 365 introduced an editable grid. So do we need to activate that for a specific entity? Something maybe yes, some maybe no. Again, it really kind of depends on what's happening here. Okay, any questions on views or forms? Gordon asked if is there any way to run as another user? Of course there is. So basically what happens is, Gordon, you just right-click on your browser and do a start in browser. This is IE. Start in private browsing. If you're CRM online, just log in as the other person. If you're on Edge, you might can. That's it. Chrome has incognito, and then you sign in with different. You sign in with the different users' credentials. You can also do basically run as another user, depending on how you do that. Okay. Alexander says shift right click. Yeah, that'll work too. And so basically, the idea is, depending on how you do it, you'll get prompted for that credentials one way or the other. Again, if it's on premise, you'll get the standard login box, and if it's online, you'll have to log into whatever service it is, and that's how you find out. Okay, so that's a great kind of segue into probably a totally different webinar, but as far as testing goes, if possible, it's always good to have additional test users within your system that is of a specific security role or role so that you can see what it actually looks like. Because as administrator, you're always going to see everything, and it's really not a true test because they're not going to see the same thing, or you're not going to see the same things they see. Okay? So let's talk about reports. Well, I slapped myself in the face with the mic. What is a report anyway? Well, most people, when you ask them what a report is, will tell you it's a piece of paper. Well, that is incorrect. A report is a view of data, any view of a data. That could be a piece of paper. It could be a view. It could be a chart, Power BI tile, a true report with SSRS, Excel worksheet, or a Word document. Any of these things are technically a report. Most of the time, when you're working with reports, like, oh, I need a report that shows me this. That's not really what they want. They want to see something, okay? So it's up to you to determine what are they actually wanting to see and when do they want to see it. In one of my other webinars, I was talking about you have a request that the CEO would like a report the first thing every Monday of his top customers, top 10 customers. Okay, well, I'll do that for you. Okay, no, you won't. You'll create a dashboard that has a chart that shows you your top 10 customers by revenue, and then he or she can go out and look at that chart anytime they want to, and it's live and it's there, and there's no report and there's nothing to be thrown away. Okay, so whenever you're creating reports, always remember you need to get to the bottom of what is the final outcome. Okay, so again, working with dashboards, we have charts and lists, which are views, iframes, which can point to other websites, etc. And now we have the ability to put Power BI tiles on our dashboards. So again, all of these things will help the user get a handle from a very high level of their current situation. Any questions on that? No? Okay. Let's talk about automation. So we have several different processes that are built into the system. The oldest and most commonly used is workflows, followed by dialogues. Now we have business process flows, and finally business rules. So all of these will help you automate something somehow, depending on the situation. The first question is, what could you automate? Okay. Again, most of this is with workflows. And then the second thing is, after you figure out we could automate it, should we automate it? And it goes back to the thing I said earlier. If you don't have a clearly defined, valid process for your organization, you can automate it, but you end up with a fast, bad process. So the idea here is you need to come up with a justification to why we're doing it the way we're doing it, and is it going to be worth the time and effort for the user and for me to create. Okay? So again, workflows are great at automating standard, repeatable processes. That's what they're designed for. And the reason we create workflows and dialogues to an extent as well is because we have something we want to do, and it's going to be done the same way every single time, and therefore the output or the outcome is exactly the same every time. That's why we do that. Okay. Okay, hang on a second, cough. Okay, JavaScript. JavaScript is kind of the top end or the final outcome of a lot of customization. So what happens with JavaScript is you've kind of exhausted all of the other things that you are able to do with configuration and customization of the user interface. So with the addition of business rules, we can now do a lot of things that are built into the system, or previously were built into the system with JavaScript, can now be done with the business rule. It's not the same thing because of just some design things, like we can't check current state of the form and stuff like that. JavaScript in 98% of all cases is to control the form operation, so how it looks, how it behaves, things like that. You can do a lot with business rules, and you move to standard JavaScript when you just hit a wall where you cannot do it. Business rules allow you to do very specific things like change values, set required level, show and hide fields, things like that. But what if it needs to do something that's not in that list of 5 or 6 things? Well, at that point, we have to go to JavaScript to do it. What do you need to know? Well, I've got a few documents on my site that you can download for free, and kind of helps you get started with that. And the biggest thing is it's just practice. So there's a lot of good information, like I said, out there. You just have to go and do it. And the final question is, does that make you a developer? Technically, yes, it does. Are you a good developer? Probably not, but you will be. So again, the big difference between a good developer and a bad developer in most cases is practice. So the more you practice, the better you get. If you don't get any better without practice, now I did have a friend of mine, he was like that, wrote some of the most horrific code you've ever seen in your entire life, and he did it for years, but he got paid well, and he was happy. So there you go. Okay, let's talk about mobile for a second, because mobile is becoming more and more prevalent as we move along. One of the things that we can do, and I surely wish they would ever add this to the standard web interface, is we have different controls that we can enable that are only shown in the mobile device, and this is some of them. So for things like numbers, we have a slider we can add. Options that can be shown as buttons. You can use a flip switch for two option fields, or yes or no, or star rating, or probability with a radial knob. All these fun things that we can do and store the data inside CRM using the normal things. All we have to do is modify the field and said, hey, when you display on mobile, use this control instead of the normal control. That's all there is to it. And then CRM takes care of the rest whenever it's rendered within the mobile or the tablet client. So when you're designing stuff, remember we only have one set of forms that is used through mobile and web, but the rendering engine is different. So it's rendered slightly different. So whenever you're working with a mobile workforce, you need to make sure that how your web is displayed and your mobile, that they're actually compatible, so that they don't look funny, because it's very easy for that to happen. And then finally, we've got a few Dynamics 365 specific features. So let me see a show of hands. How many people have actually heard of business apps with Dynamics 365? You of you? Okay. Yeah, just a handful. Okay. So it's kind of an interesting concept. So what they're trying to do, or where I think that they're headed, and they kind of said this out loud, is they're trying to get down to where CRM, well, CRM's not called CRM anymore, it's Dynamics 365, is extremely modular. So you only have to buy and use the pieces you want. So for instance, if you want to buy and use only the sales piece, you can do that. If you want to buy and use only customer service, you can do that as well. And the way they do that is by making these different components more or less standalone business applications. For instance, this is what the service app looks like, the one at the top left. This is the service app. The bottom right is the sales app. This is all that's included on the user interface. Now, behind the scenes, all the data is still there, all the fields, all the entities and stuff like that. But as far as the user is concerned, this is all we have. So service only has the customer service module. Sales has sales and marketing. And as you can see, just the stuff that goes with it. Okay. And this is really great for people within your organization that don't necessarily have to see the other parts. So for instance, if we have a customer service center and they're only in customer service, we can just flip on the customer service app, have them log into that. They don't see sales, marketing, and all the other stuff that goes with it. Like always, if the salespeople want to get into CRM, they can only see the sales stuff. Administrators see everything, and then you can create your own custom apps to be a hodgepodge of any of these things put together. Okay, so this is pretty interesting. Like I said, this is we've got a designer, and you can do this yourself. So it's just called apps, is what it is. More features we'll probably talk about, or we have talked about before, or maybe later. We have editable grids. We can now embed Power BI. Office 365 Group is another way to embed that communicates inside of a CRM record. We have project service automation, field service. We have Power Apps and Microsoft Flow. All of these things will add additional functionality and power to the user to give them, or make them more productive. Okay, so as you work through your customization journey, you need to understand what all of these things do and when it applies and when it doesn't apply. That's the key. It's it's really not necessarily knowing how everything works, but knowing when you need to use what thing to get the job done. And remember, with Dynamics 365/CRM, there are almost always 4 or 5 ways to do everything. But one of those, maybe sometimes two of those, is the most proper way to do that thing. So you outline, okay, we've got this, here's 5 ways to do it, and then just start adding, subtracting until you get down to the one that makes the most sense, given the requirements and what the customer wants. Okay? Any questions? I mean, questions today. Any questions today? No? Now, I can't believe that. Oh, there's one. Greg asks, how do you ensure you have the latest version of a form? If it's published, it's the latest version. Basically, if it's in question, just clear your browser cache. That's really the thing. Most of the time, the later version of CRM is really not as big a deal as it used to be. The form almost always gets thrown down pretty substantially. But that's about it. How do you handle deleted form? When you delete a form, basically the user will get the next one. The default form is what will happen. Lori Beth asks, what do you think the biggest single change between Dynamics 365 and 2016? Overall, the navigation is slightly different, but it's a big enough difference to make it where it has to be a little bit of a learning curve there. Kimberly, how do you deal with multi-select option sets? There's at least one other solution I've seen out there that uses a combination of web resources and a hidden field to do multi-select option sets. Let's see here. Very clarifying. Yeah, Greg, basically, if you're talking about latest version of form, you're just going to have to make sure that it's included in your package. There's really no way to ensure that other than making sure that your metadata properties you select when you build up the solution is correct. John asked about converting out of the box local option sets to a global. Um, yeah, it's okay to do. You want to do it, fine. I mean, you're not deleting. You can't delete the out of the box one. So basically, what you do is you just rename it to where you don't use it and just create your own. We do that all the time. Um, it's very common to put in for country or state. Those are text fields within the entities. So it's very common to put in either a lookup or an option set and just hide the other field and not use it anymore. So that's very common. Kurt asked if I should mention some of the browser issues with customization. IE, in most cases, provides you the actual best form design experience. Chrome doesn't like things. In IE, you can double click on an item like a field on the Field Explorer, and it will actually add it to the section. Chrome makes you actually drag and drop. Sometimes either one of them will get upset with you because you weren't smiling enough today or something, whatever it might be, and it will refuse to drag and drop. So sometimes you actually have to just restart your browser, believe it or not. Such and like I said, if you delete the form and the users used it, it should roll back to using the default form. If you set the default form, then that's going to be a problem. Roberto, yes, all the customization we talked about apply to both on-premise and online. There's no difference as far as that stuff goes. Danielle asked about controlling the field label display truncation. The only thing you can do is make the width of the label on this from the section larger. That's all you can do. There's nothing else we can do about it. That's a system thing. I've heard that they're going to change that in a new release, but I don't know when that's actually happening. Alexandra asks, managed solutions remove things. Managed solutions never remove anything, ever. So no fields are deleted, no things are deleted. So in a managed solution situation, you will always have your artifacts. Jared Varjan asked about licensing between 2016 and 365. Dude, I don't have time to get into that kind of conversation. It is different. It is more expensive, but the granularity is now there. So there are certain types of users that you can get for 10, 12 bucks a pop. So it's called a team license. So it's all in the licensing guide. If you just go look that up, do a search for Dynamics 365 licensing guide, and you'll find all your answers there. But again, the licensing is more expensive, but we now have more options. So you don't have to buy the whole thing. You can buy pieces, and then within those you have other things. So it's actually a really good change, I think. Harshini's asked about replace a third-party grid with 365. I don't know which third party you're talking about. I couldn't answer that because it's going to depend on the third party grid. Quite honestly, this is a version 1, so make sure that the feature set is on parity. If not, just keep your existing one. Quite honestly, any of these things, if you have a solution that works, keep it. Okay, you don't need to go rip it out just because Microsoft came out with it. Okay, if it does, because it's probably not going to have exactly the same functionality, and you've already got it done, so it's working. Don't go cause yourself more work. But if you're doing an upgrade and you need to reevaluate stuff, and you've got licensing issues to consider, then that's when you would take a look at it. Francisco, I asked about licensing and public content. If you're talking about the portal, you don't need a license for portal because it's data. Technically, the users are considered data. They're not actually logging into CRM. They're just accessing CRM data through a portal. Alexander asks, when would you use a real-time workflow? Whenever you need it to function in real time. It performs exactly the same steps, but the start criteria is a little bit different. It depends on the situation. 90% of the time, you're going to stick with a background workflow, not a real-time workflow. Arshini says screen to refreshes twice each time it loads. That's probably you've got some kind of form selection issues, what that is, I would say. Rajesh asks, can you use a different form for a different customer? You can. It is a pain, and it causes a lot of concern with the user because they will see a form flip in front of them. So you have to change using JavaScript, and what will happen is you will load one form, and then the JavaScript will fire, and then maybe load a different form, and they will see it change in front of their eyes, and that will cause a phone call, and that's bad. Is real-time workflow at the front end or at the server? It technically is executed on the server, but it still happens in real time. So I'm really not 100% clear where it actually executes. Okay. Anything else? That's a lot of good questions today. Does real-time workflow update things on the form? Yes, it does. In front of the user, it sure does. Yeah, that's one of the few times I actually use real-time workflow because it will actually update the form. Background workflows do not update the form because the form doesn't exist. Yeah, Alexander, all you really got to do is go try it out. Just flip the switch, make it into real time, and then basically set where it does, and it'll just go. Okay. Well, if that is it,